Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me. It's Jo here, and I'm here to give you my interview as a craft business. Well, I'm actually really lucky in that I have 3 roles that I do as part of my career. One is obviously I work for Technology Triumphs. 2, I'm also a virtual assistant for a small indie clothing company. And then number 3, I actually have my own craft business, and that's the one that I'm going to be talking to you about today. When I say craft business, exactly what do I mean? Well, I consider myself to be really lucky in that I love giving any craft a good old go. It really helps me express myself creatively and just try new things as well. So my business started out making vegan natural soaps, and I got into this just by having a go at making soap one day. I used a melt and pour base and it went really well, but the amount of ingredients on the list and things I couldn't pronounce, things that I couldn't work out what they came from, made me think, I'm sure there's a better way. And obviously soap has been around for generations, and we wouldn't have had those chemical components back in the day. So I really wanted to look into the history of soap making and how it used to be done. And then of course that led me to being able to try to make soap completely from scratch by myself, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the process of making it. I loved being able to combine ingredients. I also loved researching all of those ingredients and what they can do for your skin, as well as the essential oils that I use in them as well. And looking into aromatherapy and what certain essential oils can do for your skin and what they can do for your mind as well through the aroma of them. Making soaps led me on to making things that are kind of complementary to soap as well. So I was making things like reusable cloths, reusable shower puffs and things like that, which led me into crochet. And then I was looking into all sorts of other things that I can do. So it went into candle making, it went into wax melt making. I then got into textile crafts. So I've been making fabric corner bookmarks and long line bookmarks, really big bookmarks for people who always lose theirs. And then it's just kind of constantly evolving into the new things that I try, and then I look into whether or not there's a demand or a market out there for people who also want to buy handcrafted goods. Have I always wanted to do this? Well, quite simply, no. I landed into this just from expressing myself creatively and having a go with a craft. But I do think there is a part of me that's always wanted to do something like this. I have come to the realisation that I think that I possibly, or most likely, have undiagnosed ADHD. And coming to that realisation has explained a lot of the things to do with my working career before this, and also the journey that I'm on now as well. So within my craft business, I make a lot of various items to sell, and I think that actually is indicative of the fact that I possibly have ADHD, because I'm trying new things and then I'll find a new thing to try and I give that a go, and then that gets added into the business, and then something else will appear and I'll add that back in as well. So no, it's not always something that I've wanted to do, but I think there's always been a part of me that has needed something like this in my life, that helps me channel that potential ADHD in a positive and creative way. So my journey from my school years to now is it's quite flighty, I guess I would say. Kind of went a little bit here, a little bit there. Again, possibly a great indication of the fact that I most likely have ADHD. But at school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a career. I finished my GCSE schooling and then stayed on at the same school for sixth form to do my what was AS level and A level. And that was really just because I didn't really know what else to do. So I figured I may as well stay there for 2 years and just go into the subjects that at that time had really captured me, and I really enjoyed them. So at AS level and A level, I studied graphic design, I studied economics, I studied sociology, and then at that time we had to do something called general studies, and also studied ICT as well. And after I left my sixth form college, I still really didn't know what to do. I wasn't one of those people who had a real sense of self and what they wanted to explore, and I also kind of didn't really know what I was good at. Even at 18 years old, when the rest of the world kind of considers you to be an adult, I didn't have any idea what I was good at. I knew I enjoyed certain things, but then I didn't really know if I enjoyed them enough to make them a career. So I then fell into a retail job, and retail was relatively easy for me, and so I stayed on within retail and moved up the ranks within retail to a supervisor. Then I was an assistant manager, a concession manager, and then eventually ended up as a store manager as well. And then there was this thing called a recession that hit, and that basically winds up to nobody really has any money anymore, and so they're not shopping as much as they were. And at that time I was working in a really, what we would call, niche or specialist store, and they're usually the first ones to get really hard hit in a recession because they're considered to be quite luxury items, and so people will revert to buying cheaper versions of that product that they can get in, say, a supermarket. So the shop that I was working in was closed down by the company that owned it, and I was made redundant. And so after that, obviously, big recession, nowhere in retail really wants to hire anyone, they're facing store closures, so I ended up then moving into healthcare and in an administration role. So I was a front of house for a chiropractic office, so meeting and greeting people, going through their treatment plans, payments, all that kind of thing. And then after that, I moved into working with the NHS. So still within healthcare, still within an administration role, but working for the public sector and not private. And that was really great for me because at the time I had a son, and it was a way of being able to earn a little bit of money, kept to quite strict hours. There was no pressure to stay later or anything like that. So it really fitted in with what my life was like at that time. But after a while, typing into spreadsheets really did get a bit boring. And so I decided to leave that role. And that was also around the time that my son was expected to start in nursery and moving into preschool, and we'd already decided that we were going to home educate. So I was at home. And then fast forward through the years, and my son was getting a bit older and didn't really need me as much, and so I had the opportunity to really look into the types of things that I enjoyed, which I probably hadn't really explored up until then. And so I got into crafting, and then that leads us up to well, you've probably guessed, is that it is creating things. It's getting to be crafty, it's getting to share that with the world, it's getting to explore new things, even down to things like researching new crafts or new materials to use and things like that. I find all of that really fascinating, and it suits my personality and what my brain needs as well, for kind of the excitement, but not crazy levels of excitement as well. Having to look into what's known as SEO, so search engine optimization, and writing what we call copy for my products when I list them online. Now, the majority of my sales actually come from word of mouth, so people reach out to me on social media and on email, and they say, oh, I've got this idea of something, can you create it? Or, I love the bookmarks, have you got this certain kind of fabric, things like that. So that's where most of them come from. But I also have my own Etsy shop as well. And one of the least favourite parts of my job is having to create the listings on Etsy. I kind of find it difficult to find the right words, as they call it, to boost the listings so that it appears when people search for certain things. So I find that aspect the most difficult. And then possibly also dealing with things like spam. You might have heard of things like this where bots and things like that send out messages to accounts, and especially on Etsy as well, you get quite a lot of them where they're effectively just trying to get personal information off of you, and you end up in a kind of scam where they try to siphon off money and things like that. And they just take time away from what you want to be doing, or taking time away from actually focusing on your customers and your creative side of things, because you have to report them and you have to try to figure out if it's a scam or if it's someone who maybe isn't understanding Etsy as a platform and things like that. So they just take time away from me, and that's another aspect of selling online that I really don't enjoy and would much rather not have to deal with. The biggest challenge in my industry is probably competition. There are obviously hundreds and thousands of creative people out there, crafters who are exceptional at what they do, and we're all trying to showcase what we do to the public and hope that somebody likes it, hope that somebody wants to buy it. It's really, really hard to come up with a 100% original idea to put out there, but that's kind of okay as well. There is what they call space for everyone at the table. Someone might really like what I do, and another shop out there on Etsy might do kind of almost exactly the same thing, but a customer will just buy from kind of whichever store they like the look of the most. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is that there is lots of competition out there, and trying to stand out amongst the competition and get yourself seen as well, especially if you're using platforms like Etsy. It's really hard to be, you know, the top page of results that come up. So yeah, probably the biggest challenge is the competition. Personally, another big challenge is myself. I often don't think that what I create is necessarily good enough, or that anyone's going to like it enough to buy it. So probably one of the biggest challenges that I face personally is my own sense of self-esteem and my own anxiety as well about putting new things out there. But I'm definitely getting better at that. So my Etsy store is getting bigger, so that's fantastic. But you just have to put yourself out there, really, and that's the best advice I can give in the same situation. So what qualifications or training do you need to do the same thing? Quite simply, not really any. Obviously, the most important thing is that you have a skill and a creative understanding of the crafts that you're putting out there. You also need to have a really good understanding of the requirements of certain craft products that you are selling. So especially for me within soap making, it was really important for me to understand the safety aspect of soap. You're creating something that goes on a person's skin, which is a really delicate organ. So you really need to know that what you are putting into your soap and what people are going to be using on their bodies is safe for them to do. You also need to look at whether or not the amounts of an ingredient that you use are safe as well. So in some cases there are essential oils that you can use to a certain percentage, but anything over that is potentially damaging. So all of those kind of things don't necessarily come into a qualification as such, but you do need to put in a lot of time to studying them. But there are also things that you're going to need in terms of business itself, and that's things like insurance. So when you are selling a product out there, if anything were to happen to a person using it, you need to know that you have that protection and that insurance that will cover you in case anything should go awry. Another aspect that you really need to look into is the requirements of the country which you're selling in. So for example, there is a portal of soap makers and cosmetic makers in this country that you have to register with, and you have to register your product with. So all those kind of things you need to look in as well. And you also have to have something called a cosmetic safety report. And that is really guarantees the public that what you have made and what you have created is safe for them to put on their skin. It's no good just to say, yeah, it's got these ingredients and I've checked that they're safe, and yes, the internet says that they're safe. What happens is the recipes that you use go off to a chemist, and that chemist will test those recipes to ensure that what you are putting into soap is, yes, absolutely safe for use. Then you get given your safety report. You use that safety report to add your products onto the portal that I was talking about, and you also use both of those aspects to then go and gain your insurance to be able to provide those things to the public. You also need to be really aware of labelling requirements for the country that you live in as well. So in the UK, we still follow the EU guidelines, even though we're no longer in the EU, but that aspect didn't change when we left the EU, which was really handy for soap makers, I've got to tell you, because I was not looking forward to having to redo all of my packaging labels. So those dictate the requirements that your label absolutely must have, and that's things like, so you must list all of your ingredients, you must list the weight, you must list the address of where those items are made, and certain other aspects as well. So although not necessarily formal qualifications, there's a lot of knowledge and requirements legally that go into being able to produce certain products. Now, although I myself don't make them, if you were making things that were going to be used for children, so in play, so in toys, you would also have to go through a really stringent process with those as well, with CE testing and things like that. But I'm not an expert on that because I don't create them, but if you were looking at getting into crafts, that is definitely something that you would need to look into in case you're hoping to produce items that are going to be used by children. Or even if they're not designed to be used by children, if a child could think that they were a toy, they are still covered under that same requirement as well. So again, not a formal qualification, and I haven't been trained officially by a registered soap maker, for example, but there is just a lot of background information, a lot of research that goes into creating your products before you put them out there for usage. Now, there are other aspects that come into having your own business as well, and that's going to be covered in a video that appears later on this week. But you're also going to need to consider things like being registered as a business, as a sole trader, and how to fill in your tax self-assessment forms and those kind of aspects as well when you have your own business. The next question that I got asked was, if I wasn't in this profession and in this industry, what else would I do? Well, obviously I am really lucky in that I have 3 roles that I currently do. So if I wasn't running my craft business online, I would still be doing those other things as well. And I might potentially pick up another role as a virtual assistant with another company because it suits what I do and my home life and my schedule and our home educating lifestyle as well. But I think I would always be creative and crafty even if I didn't have it as a business. Really, having the business is a way of me just putting out there what I do creatively. I don't use it as a real money maker. I'm not trying to get my products into big stores and things like that because that's not what I enjoy about creating them, and that's not really where I see it going. But obviously you can really put into it as much as you want to and get things as big as you're willing to work towards getting them. But that's just not really something that suits me right now. Maybe in the future I would do it, but for now it just works the way it is, as kind of a hobby that makes me some money. So what advice would I give to young people looking to go into similar or same career? Number one, just don't give up. And number 2 would probably be use the feedback that you're given by others, but do your absolute best not to try it personally. Just because one person says that they don't necessarily like what you're creating doesn't mean that everybody's going to feel the same. Everybody has their own personal tastes, which is actually brilliant, because that means that there are so many people out there that you can appeal to with what you do. So even when you get feedback that feels a bit mean and a bit nasty, and some feedback that you get is going to be like that, unfortunately, because some people out there just seem to think that that's fun to do. But even when a feedback isn't necessarily positive, there's always going to be something constructive that you can find within the feedback that you've been given to improve or to design a new product that, say, does fit what that person in particular was looking for. But you can always learn from all the feedback that you're given. So feedback is really vital for growing as any kind of creative, or just as a person in general, but especially within crafting. And then number 3 would probably be, don't shy away from doing research, and don't shy away from trying new things as well. You might think to yourself that you're going to be focusing on one craft, like I did myself with soap making, and then it might just organically grow into including other things, especially with your own personal interests. So for me, I love reading, so it became natural for me to include other things for book lovers as well. So really, those are my top pieces of advice for anyone wanting to move into the same industry. Don't give up, keep going, research, feedback, and I think probably most importantly is have fun with it. I hope you've enjoyed this interview. I hope you've gained some insight into setting up as a craft business, and I hope you are enjoying Careers Week. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Bye.